I don't know if you can hear that in the background, but my Mastiff is outside quietly howling at something. Barking a bit too at the cats, but anyway. Here we are, another week. Tonight I'm gonna do a little bit of a show on unknown iron. Some of the things you find that you come across and you got no idea what it is. Some things you never really will figure them out, but there are some known unknowns that you'll come across, if you could call them that. They might not know who the manufacturer was or exactly where and when they were made, but there's enough of them around that a lot of people have some idea of where they came from, or they're enough of a common style that you see them around enough and they're kind of named. So anyway, first of all, I'd like to thank Honey J. Badger. Finally showed up. He sent me a very small burlap bag. And inside of that bag, let me get it out because it's a snug fitting little bag, is some of his homemade beeswax cast iron seasoning. I'm going to give it a try pretty soon. I haven't tried it out yet, but that was nice of him to send that, and I'll give it a shot and, maybe make a video or do it something on one of the streams of trying this stuff out to see how it works. I haven't even opened it yet, but it's definitely going to be something kind of fun to do. I also got an email from Fred Revels. Apparently him and his family are addicted to the cornmeal donuts that I did. And they are really good, and I'm glad that they liked them, gave them a try. And his actually turned out a little prettier than mine. Had real nice diamond shapes and arranged them nice on the plate. So they're pretty good. So, if you really want to give them a shot, check my videos, and it's the 1893 cornmeal donut recipe. They're fun to make. They're not real hard to make, and they're pretty tasty. I mean, they taste, you can definitely taste the corn in them, but they don't taste like cornbread, really. They're a lot sweeter because they got a good bit of sugar in them, a good bit lighter, and they're really tasty little things. So, I encourage everybody to give them a try. And the old 1893 recipes are a lot of fun to make. And they tend to be pretty simple, a lot of them. A lot of really basic ingredients, and the main difference between one recipe and another is how you handle them and what you do with them. And you find that the textures and the flavors tend to be a bit different than what we're used to today. Where a fried donut would be something really light and fluffy and airy. These tend to be, a bit heavier, but they have a really good taste to them. So, but anyway, like I said, tonight, excuse me, I was going to go ahead and have a look at some unknown and unmarked cast iron things that you might come across. I'm going to start off with, that's the wrong one. I'm going to start off with this little skillet here. Just kind of an ordinary number 3 skillet. And you look at it, you look at the back and look at the handle. Well, that's obviously a BSR, right? Well, it doesn't have a heat ring. It's got a smooth bottom on it, which would be extremely unusual for a BSR because they never made anything that didn't have a heat ring. Well, a few things, but skillets, they always had heat rings on them. There's quite a bit of debate whether BSR actually made these. They probably didn't, and I don't think they actually did either. The only marking on this pan is a tiny little number 1 stamped on the side of the handle. One of the big reasons why most people don't think BSR made these, or at least a big reason why I don't, is because they're a lot different than a BSR skillet. This is a number 3 BSR Century series, a later one from the 70s or 80s, and you can see it's a good bit bigger around if you line up the bottom edges, and it's also a good bit deeper. The ears on this are pretty pronounced, not so much on this one. I don't have a BSR Red Mountain to compare it to, but that, visually at least, these look pretty similar to the Red Mountains, although the Red Mountains do tend to have a lot bigger ears than the later ones. So you might come across something like this. It's probably not BSR, but the handle is absolutely styled after it. So it's hard to say who made this, where it came from, but they're kind of a neat little thing. I don't know how many different sizes of these you might find. Like I said, this is a number 3. I wouldn't be surprised to find, 5s and 8s because those are the most common sizes. Yeah, I mean, it's probably something that some foundry somewhere recast, and they might have used a couple of different skillets for a pattern. I mean, that could be a Wagner body to it and a BSR handle kind of cobbled together something. But it's kind of a cool little pan. And it's just, I wouldn't pay a huge price for something like this. If the seller's claiming it's a super rare smooth bottom BSR. No, it's probably not. I mean, it's probably a copy that somebody made, but they're really neat. Anyhow, set them aside. Like I said, there's quite a few known unknowns, and there's also unmarked things. I mean, everybody has heard of unmarked Wagner ware. There's a lot of those around. This one here, I don't know a lot about them. People had mentioned that they're Unmarked Favorite. And this is definitely a favorite style of pan. It's got the right type of handle on it. And the heat ring is definitely a favorite style of heat ring. The heat ring's on a favorite rather than being, let me find something that's got a heat ring on it, rather than being a separate raised heat ring. It's more that they have a sunken bottom. I mean, you can see on the edge, kind of rolls over on the edge like a smooth bottom pan. And then you have a big sunken area in the middle. And that's definitely a favorite style. So it could be a copy of a favorite skillet, or it could be an unmarked favorite. Like I said, I've heard people talking about unmarked favorites, but I haven't really researched them all that much. So I can't say definitely that this is or isn't. But in any case, it's something you might come across, and it's pretty good. It's a well-made pan. It can certainly be something that I would definitely believe was made by the favorite factory because it meets all the quality criteria that you'd expect to find on a favorite skillet. Like I said, another unmarked one. Most people have caught on to this long since. But even looking at that, you can probably tell what that is. That's a Griswold Iron Mountain. For a long time, a lot of people didn't recognize these, but I see now most people have caught on that they were made by Griswold, and they go for pretty much the same prices of any Griswold skillet. The real distinctive feature, of course, is that handle, that oblong end on the handle. So they're real easy to spot, but that's another unmarked type of skillet. Another known unmarked skillet is Birdsboro. Birdsboro is a foundry that made skillets mostly in the 20s and 30s, and they were kind of a budget brand. They weren't nearly as finished as most of the other brands in those days, the Griswolds, the Wagners, Favorite, even Wapak. And they tend to be a little bit rough casting. They weren't really machined too much on the inside. They're pretty much as cast. You see the outside is a little bit rough. They're not rough, but they definitely got a texture to them. And they weren't marked. They didn't have a logo or a brand name on them, but they did come with a paper label on the inside. And of course, the paper label disappeared the first time you used it. So it's very rare to find a Birdsboro that still has the original paper label. And if you did, it'd be worth quite a bit of money. But you can spot them nonetheless. They usually have a number stamped in it down by the handle. This is a 1. I think they're 2s, maybe 3s, but they definitely usually have just a single number on the back. And the number on the handle on at least a couple of the sizes is distinct. This is a number 7. You can see it's a pretty angular number 7, and it's kind of sloped a little bit. It has that little dot next to it. I've seen number 5s, and It's the same kind of style of 5. It's a real jagged, angular sort of design to it, and it has a dot in the middle of the round part of the 5. Now, I don't know if the 8s or 3s or something like that, or other sizes, or even what all sizes they made. I don't know if they all have the dots on them, but if you find a dotted number like that, more than likely it's going to be a Birdsboro. Okay, let's see here. Moving on, got those guys. Get down to this pile. This one, I don't know. I got no idea quite what to make of it. See, it's got a raised dot right in the center. It's got an inset heat ring. It has a raised number 8 on the handle, but that looks like it was somebody pressed that in with a number stamp into the sand on the mold and pressed it in a little too deep and got the body of the number punch in it. It's real hard to see that it's even an 8, but it is an 8. It's a little bit rough. There's some casting flaws to it, and I just don't quite know what to make of it. You can't really tell much by the handle. There's no really distinctive style to it. This could be a shop project, an amateur kind of casting. Yeah, cast iron cast, amateur casting, maybe. It might be an import. It could be something made in Korea, Taiwan, Japan, something like that. And I can't really tell exactly what type of skillet they might have used for pattern. If it was an amateur, maybe a BSR, but that's not a BSR style of handle on it. Who knows? It's just one of those things that you're going to come across. The quality isn't that bad. I mean, there's a little bit of, it's a little rough on the outside. The inside was finished out fairly nicely. Birdsboro just went up $20 a piece on eBay. Yeah, I mean, you can, like I said, you can find them. I'm not sure exactly what all sizes they made. They definitely made a number 7 because I just showed you one, and I've seen 5s. But, a lot of foundries, even the big names, some series, they didn't make every single size of it. So, whatever you come across, like I said, I don't know if all of the numbers have a dot on them, but number 5 and number 7 definitely do. And that's one of the things you can look for if you see it. Like I said, this isn't a bad pan. That'd definitely make a good everyday usable pan. But who made it, or what it was patterned from, or if it's something entirely, uniquely made just for this purpose, I got no idea. Most of the gate mark stuff you find is going to be an unknown. You're never going to figure out who made it. Some of it is marked and does have it has maker's marks on it. Gotta organize my pile a little bit here before it gets out of hand. And they do have maker's marks on them, but probably 95% of the gate mark stuff you're going to find is from an unknown maker. And even if they do have a mark on it, who knows what the mark meant. It might have been a foundry that hasn't been in business since 1890, and they're long since forgotten what it ever meant. Got an unmarked pan that's number 10 size, totally unmarked with a curved handle. Use it a lot, and it's great. A lot of the imported stuff has curved handles on it, but there's some Wagner, early Wagner ware that had curved handles on it. Usually they had the square end on it. Some of the, the square skillets had that style of handle. Some of the chef skillets had that style of handle, but, it's pretty distinctive. I mean, it's easy to find. But, totally unmarked with a curved handle, yeah, it's kind of hard to say who made it. But that's kind of the fun of it. This one is really neat. I mean, this is one of my favorite unknown pans. No markings on it at all on the back. There is a raised number 8 down here in the handle. This is actually patterned after a second series Erie skillet from the mid-1880s. So it was made sometime after that. It's got a few little casting flaws in it, but other than that, it's a beautiful pan. Now, I've seen number 9s for these, but most of the ones I've seen are number 8. You don't see them very often. But like I said, I've seen a number 9 and I got outbid for it. So there are a couple of sizes of these out there, and the number 9 look pretty similar. Is that tea or bourbon back there in the jug? Right over my shoulder there, that's bourbon. Got a big jug of bullet, however you pronounce it, on sale for $40. Usually it's a good bit more than that for that size. Anyway, yeah, it's a beautiful skillet, but that's a recast of a first or second series rather, Griswold Erie skillet from the 1880s. And like I said, you can probably find an 8 or a 9 of that size, but I don't know who made it. I should remod Billy Lee. Yeah, I went to add somebody else as a mod and ended up screwing up and dropping a couple of people. And I thought I had them all back, but I'll remember to try and remember when I'm done here to make Billy Lee a mod again. Another one here. Somebody's already mentioned it in the comments, but there are Southern mystery skillets. Now they call them that because most of them used to be found down south, so they seem to have been made by a lot of different Southern makers. There's quite a few theories on who made them. There's obviously different makers. My theory, and it's hard to really no way of proving it, is some enterprising blacksmith supply company started selling patterns to local blacksmiths and small foundries in the South for making skillets, sold a bunch of these patterns, and they kind of spread out from there. That's just my theory. There's no way of really proving it, but they all tend to have very similar features. This one is a number 8. They have a raised number on the handle. I'm pretty sure people have mentioned that there's number 5s and number 3s as well, but the 8s are definitely the most common. They tend to be a bit shallow, and this is actually a bit smaller than a normal number 8. They got real small, little tiny pour spouts on them. They've got an inset heat ring. The handle, it looks a little bit out of proportion to the rest of it, but that might be just this particular one. They also usually have a really pronounced triangular reinforcement where the handle meets the side of the pan. And like I said, they're a little bit shallower than the regular number 8, a little bit smaller diameter, but they're fairly distinctive. There are some that have different makers marks on them, different initials, different symbols, but I think there's only one that's ever been really attributed to any one particular foundry. There was a foundry, I think, in St. Louis, don't quote me on that actually put their name on a Southern mystery skillet type of pan. And it could be maybe they're the ones who invented it and everybody else from there just copied it from there. But they tend to be a little bit rough. They tend to have some casting flaws. This one you can see on the back, there's a little bit of sand shift. And you can see, where was it? Where somebody's obviously done a little bit of grinding on the, I don't know if it'll quite show. You see these kind of lines here. Those are grinding lines that were in the pattern itself. So they were pretty much heavily used, heavily reworked. And it wouldn't be terribly difficult for, a small foundry or even a blacksmith to set up a little furnace that you could melt iron with. And if you had the patterns, you could go ahead and make yourself some nice little cast iron skillets like that, fairly cheap. Most of these, another thing you can see, it's a little bit off center. It's a good bit thicker on this side than it is down by the handle. Like I said, they tend to be a little rough, a little bit crude. Still pretty decent skillets. They work nice, and a lot of people collect them. And like I said, you can find a few that do have various symbols, various makers marks on them, but nobody's really attributed them to any particular manufacturer. Let's see, what else? Then, of course, there is the ugly hammered. I guess you could call these kind of a northern mystery skillet. Most of these are believed to have come from New England, up in that corner of the country, kind of in the Rust Belt in New England. They call them ugly hammered because they have a hammered finish, but they're real indistinct, kind of random little pock marks on them. The handles tend to look real stubby. Tend to be a small kind of stubby handle on them. And a lot of them have dots in the bottom of the handle for some reason. Sometimes a straight line of 3 dots, different numbers of dots, but they usually tend to have the little dots on the bottom of the handle for some reason. It has a number 8 on the handle that was stamped on the pattern, but it's pretty indistinct. They're a hefty skillet, tend to be heavy and chunky. There's also ugly hammered Dutch ovens, and those go for pretty good money when you come across one, especially if it has a lid with it. But nobody's really quite sure who made them. There's probably more than one. Looks like it has a flaw in the upper part of the rim. Let's see here. Yeah, there's a bit of a flaw there, kind of a little flea bite in the rim. Where else here? I think that's what you're talking about, right in there. But yeah, they're an interesting little skillet. Like I said, nobody's quite sure who made them. Probably more than one company that did. What else? And the last one that I got for you tonight is the initial skillet. I've seen there's a lot of different combinations. Usually it's 2 initials. This is an FC. Yeah, that is a C. I've seen MJ, CX. There's, like I said, a lot of different combinations of initials, but they all tend to be pretty much like this. All the ones I've seen were number 9s. There might be number 8s, different numbers out there. I don't know. I haven't seen any. It's definitely a possibility. But you see, it's got some real nice swirl marks on the inside. I'm not sure what this may have been patterned out. Some say those are black lock, but it can't be proven. Now, this is definitely different than the really early Lodge, possibly black lock ones. But like I said, the initial skillets, they tend to be a little bit rough. You can see in the back of this, that's got a fair bit of sand shift. That's when you pull the pattern out of the sand in the mold, the sand shifts, and it leaves marks like that, those kind of squiggly little lines. And this one, at some point, the pattern was repaired because starting, where's that start? Starting right about there, you can see that raised area that goes all the way around to the pour spout, around the pour spout, and it ends right about where my middle finger is there. And you see that pour spout is kind of lumpy and misshapen. It's like they broke the pattern and then kind of bonded it all back together and reshaped it a bit. But they're a good skillet. They cook great. Like I said, you can see the inside is finished out real nice. And they ground the inside. It's definitely a factory made sort of thing. It wasn't just an amateur working in his backyard. And like I said, the ones I've seen of these are all number 9, but there might be other sizes. I just don't know. So if you come across them, these have gone up quite a bit. I see these usually are going for $75 to $100 now, where not all that long ago they were usually 50 or 60. So the prices have definitely gone up on them. If you come across one, for less than $70, I'd definitely say grab it because the prices have gone up, and that's a pretty good deal on it. But they're nice skillet. They cook real good. I've used that one quite a bit. And it's just something interesting. Like I said, a lot of times you can find out who made your skillet and when, but a lot of times you really can't. I mean, there's just no information left on who made them. It might have been some, small independent little foundry, a local blacksmith, like is the case with the Southern Mystery skillets. I talked with somebody who had a recast of a early Wagner, and he lived in Nova Scotia, and more than likely it was a local fellow in Nova Scotia used a Wagner skillet for a pattern because it had a big gate mark across the bottom of it, and you could tell that it was fairly crude recast. And you do see a lot of that too. A lot of Erie and Griswold skillets that have a gate mark on the bottom. And Erie Erie, Griswold, and Wagner, none of their skillets ever had a bottom gate mark on them. They started making them after the gate mark was already starting to go out or was eliminated. They were all poured from the rim. Technically all pans have a gate mark. Anything cast iron, you have to have a gate where the molten iron can get into the mold. It's just that on newer skillets, they started pouring them from the rim, and you'll find a ground off spot like right there, usually two of them somewhere on the rim. A lot of them, they had one gate where the iron came in, and on the opposite side they had a vent so that the air could push out of the mold as the iron flowed in, and they'll be ground off on both spots. Usually there's one somewhere near the handle and then one on the opposite side. But if you come across a Erie or Griswold or Wagner that has a big gate mark on the bottom, you know that it's a recast made by somebody else. I'd like to have one. I mean, just because it's kind of a cool thing. Some of them are pretty good. Some of them are pretty crude. But, they weren't actually made by Wagner or Griswold. Have I ever attempted to make a fork out of my fancy skillets, pots, or pans? I probably could. I got quite a pile over on the shelf there. And I've slowly started to work my way through that pile. I'm going to get rid of a bunch of them, sell them off. I'm going to scroll back here in the comments and see what I missed while I was chattering. Say hi to everybody. Cast Iron Chaos, good to see you. 6 drops, always good to see you, babe. Cast Iron Restore, Darla Allred, Billy Lee. Yeah, like I said, I'll try and remember to remod you, Billy. I thought I put 6 drops on as a mod as well. I'm not on the YouTube side. In fact, I should probably quick jump over and do that so that I can see what I'm doing. Let's see, get on there and mute that quick before I get a big echo. There we go. Because it doesn't show who's a mod on. I don't think it does anyway on the StreamYard side. Mike Newbie, nice to see you. Me and you, Acres. It shows if you're a member at any rate, but it doesn't show if you're a mod. Anyway, the old ways are better. Yeah, next week I'm going to do a little cooking on the wood stove, and I just decided what I'm going to make is something with this. I'm going to make some rosettes. This is a Griswold patty mold set. If you ever see a Griswold patty bowl and you wonder what the hell they're talking about, a patty bowl, that's what these were for. You can see in the picture there, they got a little whoops, knock a whole bunch of stuff down. You can see they got looks like a Scotch bowl sitting on a Griswold 1-burner gas burner. And that's what the patty bowls were. They also made sets of these that came with the patty bowl and a set of irons. There's a couple of different, there's like 4 different irons I think they made. I got that fairly cheap, very old, $15. It's got 2 handles, it's got 2 molds, one of which is on the floor. But yeah, I'm definitely going to fire that up. This is kind of cool because it came with, oops, drop that too. Came with the original recipe for making patties. It's got the Griswold logo on it and their name and address. It's a real simple batter for making rosettes. 2 eggs, teaspoon of sugar, cup of milk, some salt. You just make a batter. You dip the irons in the batter and then dunk them in hot oil and fry them up for a few seconds. This also has Marlene S.'s rosette recipe. And it's got a rosette recipe on another card. This was made by Bethany Fellowship. They're still around, and they make Scandinavian cooking products. electric Lefsa plates, rosette irons, Krumkaka irons, Lefsa rolling pins, cookie presses, related items. And they still make stuff. I see their stuff around because there's a lot of Scandinavians around here who still make Lefsa and rosettes and things like that. Destroyer of Men got his first Red Mountain piece the other day. He was stoked. Yeah, I mean, and the nice thing about the BSR stuff, they're really good pans. But since a lot of it wasn't marked, you can usually get them fairly cheap at flea markets, secondhand stores, things like that, because they're not marked, because they don't have a brand name on them. Southern Mystery Skillet recasts are often smaller than the originals. Yeah, because as you use the pan, when you recast something, you're going to end up a little bit smaller than the original because the iron shrinks as it solidifies. And they make allowances for that when they make the original patterns. But if you're using a finished skillet as a pattern, it's going to be smaller than the original pattern was. So using that as a pattern, you're going to get a little bit smaller yet. And the more steps down the line people do that, they're going to slowly shrink. Yeah, number 8 SMS will fit inside a number 8 Lodge. Yeah, they're more like closer to a number 7, most of them, like a 7.5, if you would call it that. And they tend to be a good bit shallower. But they're neat pans. A lot of people collect them. Everybody should have 1 or 2 of them just for the sake of having them. And like I said, I haven't seen any other sizes than 8, but apparently there are 5s and some 3s out there too. Found your first unmarked Griswold number 7 Iron Mountain in South Carolina a few days ago. Cool. Yeah, like I said, they're going for pretty much the same price now as any other Griswold does. Even the marked ones. They used to be a lot cheaper because a lot more people didn't recognize them for what they were. Let's see. Captain Kirk had his grandson's birthday. Well, happy birthday, Captain Kirk's grandson. Birdsboro just went up $20 on eBay. Yeah, they're kind of a neat thing, neat manufacturer. You don't see them all that often, but they're not really super rare, but they're not real common either. So, if you come across one, they're definitely worth grabbing if somebody doesn't want a huge price for it. And like I said, they're unmarked. So unless you recognize the style of the numbers, and like I said, I don't know if that dot is on everything that they made, that dot next to the number. Somebody knows or has other sizes. Like I said, the 7 and the 5 definitely do. But if you have other sizes, it'd be nice if you let me know once I get back through here. Have a new drinking game, spin the Wagner. If the handle points at you, you drink. Yeah, a lot of the Wagners have even right from the factory, had a bit of a spin and wobble to them. It's just the way they are. Use Stargazer for that. Let's see. Almost. Remod Billy. Yes, I'll remod Billy. How many distinct runs of Ugly Hammered were made and around when? I don't really know. I mean, there's quite a few different, most of the thinking goes that there were several different makers who made those. So I don't really know how many distinct runs or how you'd really tell them apart. Whether the arrangement of the dots has any real meaning to it. Some put them in a line, some didn't, some used 2 or 3. Would definitely be worth something looking into, but you'd have to look at quite a few pans, see if there's a definite distinction between them. But I know there's, like I said, there's the Ugly Hammered Dutch ovens out there. Also the theory about gate marked teardrop handles. Okay. Sent backwards gourmet a few months ago for a mystery pan. Forgot to follow up if you're able to identify. Maybe, I mean, some, you know, I know what I know, but there's a lot that I don't know. And I definitely try and figure it out if somebody asks if I don't know. But there's some things that like I said, you'll never really figure out. You might be able to eliminate a lot of possibilities. It's not one of these, but you can never quite figure out what it actually is. Found it number 8 Grizz Dutch oven. The lid is a slant and the pot is a block logo. Did they ever mix logos, or do you end up with different arrows? They did to some degree. Especially when they're changing over logo styles, you'll find different styles, different logos going matched together that weren't necessarily the same. And they did some of that from the factory. A lot of it happened afterwards. So it's kind of hard to say whether it's it came from the factory that way, or if somebody just found a lid that fit that Dutch oven. But it wasn't uncommon, and you see it in waffle irons sometimes with the part numbers aren't necessarily the same, or with stuff that was contracted out to them. Like the I showed you the Alfred Anderson irons. They were made by Griswold, and not all of the bases that came with them, they're Griswold bases. Some were marked WIC for Western Importing Company. Some weren't. Some said Griswold. Some they kind of looks like they tried to remove the Griswold but didn't quite do it. And it's kind of tough to say whether that happened at the factory or if it happened later on, because it'd be real easy for somebody, if the casting didn't come out for a base and they needed a base that would fit this waffle iron, just grab one off the pile and out the door it goes. And like I said, a lot of times you'll see when they were changing over logos, they would carry on with the old one at the same time for 2 years, 4 years, depending on how much wear and tear the old patterns got. They basically use up the old patterns while they were starting in the new ones and kind of slowly phase them. So there's usually a lot of overlap. So it is mismatched, but it's not necessarily something that happened afterwards. You have a Red Mountain 3 that doesn't look like that. Yeah, I don't have any Red Mountain 3s. They look pretty similar as far as the general shape of them, but the Red Mountains usually have bigger ears on them, larger pour spouts than the later ones. So, yeah, it'd be nice to have one to definitely compare it to. Those are some beautiful pans. Yeah, a lot of these are real nice. I mean, some of them you can tell are pretty amateurish of the unknown stuff, but a lot of them you can tell that these are definitely made in a dedicated factory foundry type of thing where they actually knew how to make hollowware, how to make cast iron things in general. So some are real nice. Like I said, that one that's a copy of the older Erie. Yeah, it's a beautiful skillet. I mean, that'd be, it almost looks like something that would have come out of the Griswold factory. Almost caught up on the bunch of it skipped ahead. I didn't know that. Saw number 14 recast Griswold with a big gate mark underneath. Yeah, I mean, like I said, you see, they weren't made by Griswold, and like I said, some are pretty nice, and I definitely want to get some, but a lot of, especially on eBay, a lot of people fall for the super rare gate marked Griswold line, which isn't exactly true. But if I find one for a decent price, I'll definitely get one. You got a gate marked pan that says Erie, so that's a recast. Yeah, they're yeah. None of the Erie skillets, none of the early Wagner skillets had a bottom gate mark on them. So if you ever come across one that does, it's one somebody used the used a finished Erie or Wagner or whatever Griswold skillet as a pattern and cast their own. Asphyxiation $5 super chat. Thank you much. I appreciate it greatly. Have you ever eaten Vegemite, and why is it the worst thing ever? Hobby of mine is tricking Yanks into eating it. I haven't had Vegemite, but I have had Marmite. You know, they're not the same thing, but they're not terribly dissimilar. I kind of like it. You know, light smear of Marmite on crackers is pretty good. One of these days I'll get ambitious and order some Vegemite off of Amazon and give it a try. Those in the know claim that there's a considerable difference in the taste, even though they're both yeast extract. New with some of the terminologies. What's a mod? It's a moderator on the stream. There's somebody that can put people in timeout, block comments that are inappropriate, or if we get rated by the sex bots, which has been a while since somebody hit me, but they're all over YouTube. You know, there'll be a bunch of ads for dating services, whatnot, and they can delete that sort of thing. Unless I started playing Skyrim. No, I haven't started playing Skyrim. I do have a lot of old video games, though. One of these days I'll finally get it all set up in the living room. I got a couple of Atari consoles, a couple of NESs, got one working PlayStation 1, a couple that don't. So eventually I will get all of that set up and running. Of course, I got to get the rest of my living room cleaned out and organized, and God only knows when that's ever going to happen. Vegemite is a blight on the hellscape of your horrendous country. It needs to be purged. Well, if you say so, I'll let the Aussies fight over the Vegemite. It'd be a cool show idea, showing how to use the patty molds. And I've seen them, but I don't know how they work. Yeah, and like I said, this is one of the smaller ones for making a rosette. They also made a deeper one that you make kind of like a little serving cup out of, you know, a salad bowl kind of thing. Put different fillings in them. They're really neat things. Of course, Alfred Andresen also made the same sort of thing. They're probably made by Griswold too, because Griswold made most of their cast iron. Not all of it. You know, like I said, some of the really, really early Alfred Andresen, they had a couple of different foundries make their stuff, but probably 99% of the Andresen things you're going to find were made by Griswold. Let's see. You're all Yanks to them, even Canadians. No, Canadians need a bit more hatred. You know, people think they're all nice and polite, but I know better. And just because I'm a contrarian kind of person, everybody hates other races, other nationalities. I pick on Canadians because, you know, nobody else really does, and I don't want the poor guys to feel left out. The Wagwald you purchased, Spider Dutch oven. What kind of lid would that have? It's kind of hard to say. I'm trying to remember. I know they made some lids that were more of a Griswold type of pattern, but they weren't marked. And they also made more of the Wagner style. So can't really say for sure what the original might have been. It could have been a glass lid too, because they were using glass lids in that period. All right. Once Corey Clark's things get in the mail, I'll show everybody. Thank you much, Corey. That was really nice of you. Yeah, I mean, Australians love it when you remind them of the Emu Wars. got beaten by a bunch of giant, angry, flightless chickens. Not exactly a high point in national pride, but they managed to survive. But still, it's fun to poke fun at them for it. And the main reason why I tried Marmite is because I can get it in my local grocery store. They actually have Marmite, but they don't have Vegemite. I'd have to get that off of Amazon. Not a BSR fryer and lid, I bet. Me and Rick D got it already. Your camp was broke. Yeah, I just saw a hammered BSR. Went for a fairly decent price too. I forget what it was, but it wasn't all that bad. I got an unmarked number 3 Pico Air with dots on the number. Wonder if these are like the Wagner and BSR that had screw molds for quality control. Could be. You know, I mean, probably got it buried too deep here. Yeah. Of course, it's right on the bottom of the pile. Yeah, there's dots next to the number on this one. Like I said, I'm pretty sure it's an unmarked favorite. It's definitely a favorite type. You know, the way that it's made. And like I said, I don't really know a whole lot about Unmarked Favorite. I've heard of it, but like I said, one of the many gaps in my knowledge. 2 questions. Number 1, when was the Pie logo used? What years? And what years did Lodge 3-notch have the U.S. under the number? I'm not positive about the Lodge. I'm pretty sure that probably in the 50s, I think, but I'm not real sure about that. I've seen them, and it seems like it's usually on some of the bigger pans. You know, but yeah, I'm not positive about that. The Pie logo, nobody's exactly sure when they were made. They have the catalog number on them, which would place them after 1924, and they're smooth bottom, which Wagner started doing in the early 1930s. They pretty much got away from the heat rings by then. But, you know, there's no real exact dates on them. So I would say they're from, you know, the late 1920s into the mid 1930s. They didn't make them all that long. Some people say they go back a lot farther than that, but it's pretty certain that they were sometime in the late 20s, early to mid 1930s. And after they did away with the Pie logo, you can still find skillets that the catalog number is a good bit higher from the rim, you know, especially like on a number 3, which I actually think I have fairly close by. Let me get that quick. Set this aside so I don't drop all of that, because I just came across it. All right, there's number 3 Pie logo. We call it the Pie logo because it looks like a wedge of pie. And you see they got the 4-digit catalog number on it. Like I said, they started doing that about 1924. But when they did away with the Pie logo itself, they still reused a lot of the patterns. They filled in, you know, where it says cast iron skillet, they filled that in. They filled in the outline around the logo. And sometimes you can find them that have ghost marks of the outline or the cast iron skillet. You can also find them that have, there's no ghost marks on this one, but you can see the catalog number kind of hand scribed looking on both of them, but the catalog number is a good bit higher up on the pan than it normally would be, because on the Pie Logo, they had to raise it to make room for cast iron skillet. Where on a regular number 3, of course I don't have one quite as handy as these two, the number is down quite a bit farther. So this is a reused Pie Logo pattern that had all the other stuff obliterated. Did a real nice good job of it, because you can't see any ghost marks on it. But once in a while you'll find them that have, you know, little fragments of line or ghost marks of the other lettering on them. So that's kind of a neat one if you know what you're looking at there. You know, like I said, you can see they're both definitely a good bit higher up on the pan. But yeah, late 20s, early 30s is the best bet on them. There's not really a whole lot of information as to when exactly they were made. What would a guy pay for a good Pyrex coffee pot? Complete, I usually see them going for around $50. But like I said, you can find them, you know, they're not real common to find in secondhand stores. But that's where I get most of mine. You can find them in antique shops too sometimes. You know, that's another source. But with all the innards and all the parts, you know, usually around $50 or so. I wouldn't pay a whole lot more than that, because you can find them for less. Still behind on the comments. Yeah, your blow up doll told me she only wanted to be friends, so you sent her to me. Well, I can appreciate that. I could always use more friends. I picked up a John C. Johnson lid skillet and both the small and large pots with it. Oh, cool. All anyone can say about them is the patent and the description. That's pretty much it. There's not a whole lot of information that I know of floating around about John C. Johnson that isn't right there on the lid, you know, where they were in the patent number. I suppose if you really wanted to, you could look up the patent number, you know, do a search on it. Might be a little bit more information, you know, as to who filed the patent, but more than likely it would just be John C. Johnson Foundry, you know, from it was Birmingham, Alabama. I think it was. Could be wrong, Alabama, I'm sure, but I think it was Birmingham. Worked at a foundry. He closed down in the late 80s, just made engine molds, but I wish I'd thought of making your own frying pan. Yeah, that would have been kind of cool. Probably wouldn't have been all that hard, you know, if you're in a foundry, you got all the stuff right there to do it with. Would have been fairly easy to make a recast out of a existing skillet. Hated the PS1. The load times were horrible between screens. Yeah, they got some pretty good games on it, though. That's a good price. I think I missed something here. Three Notch USA. Early 60s on. Yeah, the USA, made in USA, was from the early 60s on, but some of them they had US in parentheses by the number. And I think that was a little bit earlier than the USA. Like I said, I think it was from the 50s. But most of the, and I've looked at it, but I can't recall most of the information. There's a pretty definite progression on the markings on Lodge skillets. You know, when they started adding the abbreviations. Will you shut up out there, you silly mutt? The cats aren't going anywhere. Anyway, there's a pretty definite progression in the markings on them. You know, when they started adding the abbreviations, you know, SK, DO, things like that, and the raised blob for the shift numbers, and and the raised maker's numbers. And I can't remember offhand the exact progression, but you can usually date them within 5-6 years or so. Being a Canadian American family, you're not nicer. Please make fun of us. Yeah, I do. I try to I try to give Canadians a pretty decent ration of shit now and then because nobody else really does, and it'd be a shame if you were left out. I haven't seen any in the last few decades. Oh, the Pyrex coffee pots. I mean, they're out there. Like I said, you can get them on eBay. Fairly common. You're gonna have to shop around on the price because it's eBay. You'll have one guy that wants $100 for something, and everybody else wants 75, and then you can find some for 50. So basically, you find a Wagner or Griswold with the gate mark there, a forgery. There was never any lawsuits, copyright infringement. There might have been, but for the most part, it wasn't worth their time to pursue something like that because, it was just some guy in the backwoods that made, a couple of dozen pans, and they probably never found out about it. And a lot of times, Wapak was great for this, especially early on. They would take finished skillets and do what they could to erase the marks on them and then use those skillets as patterns. And that's why you find a lot of Wapak stuff that has Erie, sometimes Wagner ghost marks on them. Because, it's rather than hiring a pattern maker, which was a skilled trade back in those days, and it still is, rather than hiring and paying for a pattern maker to do it, it was a lot cheaper just go down to the hardware store, buy a couple of skillets, do a little grinding and filling on them, and use those for your patterns. No, he's just outside throwing a fit at the cats for some reason. I have an 11, just found a number 9 Pie Logo. Was my favorite find. Probably the best one that I found was a artistic logo Erie. I like finding pretty much anything. Come across a cruddy pan with a ton of buildup, you get it fairly cheap, and it turns out to be something really cool. Yeah, one of the cooler finds I found was that artistic logo Erie, because I got it fairly cheap. I mean, I forget, I think it was like $25-$30. You could tell it was an old pan, but that was all. And because they only made that style for, I think it was 1 year, like 1907, maybe a little bit longer, but that's what they usually say. And it's a cool style. That's cool with the Pie Logo. Yeah, that's kind of the holy grail of Wagner stuff is the Pie Logo. That's the one that all the collectors look for. What am I drinking? That's black cherry pop. It's pretty good stuff, actually. Yeah, not cheap anymore. Somebody must have educated vendors on BSR. Yeah, I mean, pretty much all cast iron has gone up the last few years. Yeah, but you can still find just pretty good deals on a lot of stuff that wasn't obviously marked. I mean, a big Griswold logo. Yeah, I mean, something easy to spot. Pretty much everybody knows what it is. But something that's just got a 6 stamped on the back, unless you know the difference between Lodge and BSR and some of the other things, you can still do all right on some things. Mine just have 14 US. Yeah, I think it was the bigger ones. Heard the Lodge were military contract griddles and pans, but not sure. It could be. I mean, it makes sense. A big skillet. A big skillet. On a big, for making big batches of stuff in an army post, definitely makes sense. I don't know if that's true or not either. I have a new Lodge double Dutch chicken fryer with a gate mark they didn't file. Yeah, sometimes you get casting flash. A little bit of iron will creep into the seams on the mold. Usually they knock that off, but sometimes they don't. A lot of times you'll see it on the inside of the hanging hole on the handle. I have an 8-inch skillet that was a one-off from a hydrant valve foundry locally here in Alabama. Cool cast iron piece. Also have an ashtray. Yeah, I have a couple of those. You know, there's the little advertising skillets, you know, little toy size or ashtray size skillets. And, you know, you can buy 1,000 of them from a foundry. They make them for you. You know, Lodge has done quite a few of that, and a lot of different ones have. And, you know, I mean, some people kind of collect too, because there are a lot of different interesting ones. And sometimes foundries, yeah, they would make their own skillets, you know, just as kind of a special deal for employees, you know, the company's 100th anniversary or something like that. Anyhow, we're at an hour, so if I ever get quite caught up on these comments here, I'm going to say goodnight. You haven't run across a Pie Logo yet? Yeah, they go for quite a bit more than your average Wagner the same size, because like I say, they're fairly scarce. They didn't make them for a long time, you know, 2, 3, 4 years maybe. And so they're uncommon, and there's a huge demand for them. So that really, you know, between supply and demand, it really runs the price up on them. Chip, $10 super chat from Chip. Thank you very much. I love super chats. Thank you for spending time doing these chats. Well, you're welcome. You know, I like doing them. They're a lot of fun. Get to talk to people, and people ask questions, and I learned quite a bit from this. You know, I mean, because like I said, there's, you know, I mean, I try to understand everything I know, and there's a lot of gaps in my knowledge, and this is a good way of filling it in because other people know other things. And just chatting back and forth. You know, I mean, I see, you know, a lot of people pick up information from each other in the chat, you know, and that's kind of the point of the whole thing. Get to share what you know, what you think, what you found, and generally get together and hang around and chat with each other. Been cooking on the BSR stove. Let's just say it ain't easy. There's a learning curve to cooking on a wood-fired stove. It takes a bit to learn. You know, the main thing, once you learn how the fire works, you know, how to build a fire to get the heat that you want. But at the same time, you're also trying to juggle a couple other variables with where you have your damper position and what you're trying to cook. So, you know, it's a learning curve, but once you get the hang of it, it does come pretty easy. You know, like I said, learning how to fry something on the stove top is a lot easier than learning how to bake in one, because, you know, it's easier. It's a little more forgiving. You can move your pan around to cooler spots on the stove. And something I should ask you, a lot of the stoves had grates you could use either coal or wood on, you know, and they're kind of triangular. If you flip them one way, they're more or less solid, but they have holes in them. If you flip them the other way, they have open slots in them. If you want your stove to burn a little bit slower on the wood, you know, so it's not going through quite as much wood, not burning as hot and as fast, you get a little easier control over it. Flip it to where you have the holes in it. That was more made for coal, really, than wood. But your fire won't burn as fast. You can still burn a pretty good hot fire with the wood, but it won't burn through so much wood, and you get a little more control over it with the dampers when you don't have quite as much air going through it. You know, I don't know if your stove has that kind of grates on it, but if it does, you know, try it that way a little bit, and they'll kind of slow things down and moderate a little bit easier. 350 from Brian Andrews. Thank you much. Greatly appreciated. Let's see, emu is tasty. Get it, Walker. Yeah, like I said, you know, just keep at it. And making a cast iron short. I've been meaning to make shorts. I actually had my nephew make a little logo for me for cast iron shorts, and I haven't got around to it, but it'd be kind of fun. Loch Ness Monster won't leave you. Okay, anyhow, what teapot do I have there? That one behind me. That's a Wagner, not the Colonial. Can't remember which series it was now. It's a little more of an Art Nouveau, Art Deco style. And but that's a Wagner that I cleaned up. Okay, cast iron apprenticeship's cooking on a wood stove is awesome. I'm gonna get to the end of these quick here eventually. There I am. Just don't shoot your shorts. Well, I'll try not to, Corey. Anyhow, it's been fun. Hope you all enjoyed the show. Thank you much for the super chats. It's greatly appreciated because I can turn around and spend that on more cast iron things. Like I said, next week I'm gonna do a little cooking on the wood stove, and we'll try and make some rosettes. Been a long time since I made rosettes at all, but hopefully it'll work. And I'll see you guys next week. Bye.